The Naval Air Hangar at Falcon Ridge Base didn't usually feel like a place where life-altering decisions were made. It was loud, metallic, and suffocating with the smell of oil and exhaust, a place where engines roared, boots thundered, and orders were shouted more than spoken. But on that late summer afternoon, as heat trembled over the tarmac and shadows stretched long across the concrete, the hangar carried an uncanny silence that made even the fluorescent lights seem too bright, too sharp, too watchful. Dozens of service members, Navy SEALs, Air Force rescue medics, Army aviation specialists, and a scattering of civilian wildfire experts stood in tense semicircles, murmuring nervously as they waited. A mission alert had gone out less than an hour earlier. A rescue helicopter fighting wildfire collapse had gone down inside a canyon system that was already choking with flames. Communication with the crash survivors was weak and scattered. A medical evacuation needed to be launched immediately. Lives were at stake, and everyone knew it. Someone whispered, "It's his call." Another murmured, "He's not gonna like this one." Nobody had to clarify who he was. Commander Nate Calloway, the man whose reputation carried the weight of both fear and fierce respect, was leading this operation. In Navy SEAL circles, his name was practically legend. Hard-charging, relentless, unbreakably disciplined. A man who never hesitated, never backed down, never accepted failure as an option or excuse. Rumor said that when Calloway entered a room, even the air held its breath. So when his boots finally boomed against the metal floor, the entire hangar snapped to rigid stillness like a taut wire suddenly yanked. He walked in fast, authoritative, flanked by two senior officers trying to keep up. His jaw was locked tight, muscles flexed under his uniform, eyes narrowed in the laser-focused way of someone who had already counted the risks before the briefing even began. Calloway didn't bother with introductions. He didn't waste time acknowledging the crowd or softening the tension. He simply strode to the center of the hangar and turned on his heel with the intimidating precision of a man used to being obeyed. "All right," he barked, his voice slicing through the quiet. "We're going into wildfire territory. A medevac Black Hawk went down just north of Rockbridge Canyon. Crew status, unknown. Fire behavior, extreme. Time limit, unknown." People shifted uneasily. No one wanted to be reminded that unknown was shorthand for bad. Calloway continued, "This will require an extraction team, ground support, air support, and—" He stopped abruptly, scanning the room. Then, in a voice that wasn't a question as much as a challenge, he demanded, "Any combat pilots?" The words reverberated through the hangar like the opening strike of a drum. For a moment, no one moved, not a breath, not a twitch. Even the distant rumble of jets seemed to mute itself. His gaze swept over the faces, seasoned medics, hardened soldiers, tech specialists, all capable, all experienced, but not one willing to step forward. Calloway exhaled sharply through his nose. "We don't have time for hesitation," he growled. "We need someone who can fly into a firestorm and hold steady under atmospheric collapse. If nobody here is trained, someone say so. Otherwise—" And then it happened. From the far corner of the hangar, where the lighting dimmed and crates of equipment created pockets of shadow, someone moved. A figure rose slowly, quietly, as if stepping out of the background rather than emerging from it. A woman. Not tall, not physically imposing, not wearing the expression of someone eager to prove anything. Instead, she stood with a kind of calm confidence, the kind that didn't need noise, bravado, or swagger. Her posture was disciplined yet unforced, her chin level, her expression unreadable. A fleeting sunbeam from the hangar door caught the edge of her badge. Lieutenant Mara Holt, United States Air Force. Several heads turned. Someone whispered, "Holt, what is she doing here?" Another frowned, thought she was still on medical clearance. Another muttered, "No way she's volunteering for this." And a fourth, with a short shake of disbelief, said what many were thinking. Does she even have the flight hours for this kind of mission? But Mara didn't seem to hear the murmurs behind her. Or maybe she did and simply didn't care. Commander Calloway did hear them. He fixed his gaze on her, sharp, scrutinizing, measuring her in 2 seconds flat. Unimpressed, he asked bluntly, "Lieutenant, you flew combat?" Mara didn't blink. "Yes, sir." Calloway's eyes narrowed. Actual combat, not simulations, not controlled exercises, not rescue assists under supervision. Direct fire zones, atmospheric instability, limited visibility, high turbulence, fuel constraints, enemy threat. His voice grew more challenging with each word. The corner of Myra's lip twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Yes, sir," she said again. The room stirred. A low hum of disbelief spread through the ranks. Some eyebrows lifted, some eyes squinted, and Commander Calloway's expression hardened, though whether in doubt or intrigue no one could tell. "What jets?" he asked. "HH-60 Pave Hawks," she replied. That got everyone's attention. Her calm, unwavering tone cut through the hangar in a way that made people feel something they hadn't felt seconds earlier, a flicker of hope. Calloway stepped closer, stopping a foot from her. His voice dropped lower. "If you lead this mission," he said, "you need to understand precisely what that means. The canyon winds are generating pyrocumulus surges. Visibility is collapsing every 10 minutes. The fire is shifting faster than models can track. If you take a bird in there," he paused, "people might not come back." Mara met his gaze without wavering. Her eyes, steady, deep, quietly fierce, held something that made Calloway's jaw tighten in an entirely different way. She had seen things, lost things, survived things. And she was not afraid. She inhaled softly. "Permission to speak freely, sir." Calloway nodded once. "I know what this mission means," she said, "and I know what it will cost if we wait, so yes, sir, I will fly." Before Calloway could respond, a young communications specialist rushed into the hangar, panting, face flushed with urgency. "Commander, sir," he yelled. "Update from Wildfire Command. The crash site just transmitted a coded pulse. It's weak, but it confirms multiple survivors." A ripple of relief and anxiety surged through the hangar. "How many?" Calloway demanded. The specialist swallowed hard. "3 confirmed, and 1 additional life sign that wasn't on the original manifest." Murmurs broke out instantly. "What do you mean additional? Who else was on board?" "Civilian contractor." Calloway's Josette. "Identify the 4th now." The specialist hesitated, and that hesitation made Mara glance at Calloway sharply. "Sir," the specialist said, lowering his voice, "the 4th life sign was tagged with a personal clearance beacon." Calloway stiffened. "Whose clearance?" The technician's eyes flicked nervously to Mara, then back to Calloway. "Yours, sir." The hangar went dead silent. Even the hum of machinery seemed to fade into nothing. Calloway stepped forward, voice dangerous. "Explain." The specialist swallowed hard. "Sir, your younger brother, he was aboard the aircraft." The hangar erupted into whispers, shock, disbelief. Mara's eyes widened, not in fear but in understanding. Suddenly, everything shifted. The mission wasn't just life or death. It was personal. Calloway's stare darkened, emotions flickering behind his armored exterior. Rage, fear, and something deeper, something no one had ever seen surface on his face before. But before anyone could speak, before Calloway could regain control of the room, before Mara could process how drastically the stakes had changed, the hangar's emergency alarm exploded into a piercing wail. The lights went red, the radio screamed. A Wildfire Battalion chief burst in shouting. "The crash site fuel tank is overheating. If we don't get a bird out there in the next 30 minutes, it's going to blow." The room lurched into chaos. Calloway turned sharply toward Mara. Her jaw clenched, her eyes locked onto his. Her voice, when it came, was calm, unbearably calm. "Sir," she said, "we fly now." Calloway opened his mouth to respond, but a voice crackled through the intercom, trembling with fear. "Command, we just detected a new thermal signature near the crash site. Something big, something moving." And just like that, the mission changed again. The hangar's red warning lights cast Mara Holt's face in deep, shifting shadows as she processed the latest report. Flames, collapsing trees, and an unknown moving heat signature in the canyon. This wasn't just a downed helicopter anymore. It was a living, breathing disaster waiting to devour anyone who entered. Around her, men and women scrambled, radio chatter overlapping with the wailing alarm. But Mara felt an odd calm settle over her, the kind only people who had stared death in the eye more times than they cared to remember could feel. Commander Calloway's expression was unreadable, but Mara had seen that look before, the perfect mix of respect, suspicion, and the raw calculation of a man who had survived impossible missions. He approached her, boots clanging against the steel floor, and stopped 2 feet away, blocking her path to the flight line. "You're sure you want this?" he asked, voice low but sharp, not a question, a test. "I'm sure, sir," Mara replied. Calloway's gaze swept over her, scanning every detail, her uniform, her stance, the calm certainty in her eyes. He had no illusions about her skill. She had flown combat sorties in hostile zones no less deadly than what they were about to face. But this was different. Wildfire, unstable terrain, civilians trapped, and now a moving heat signature they couldn't identify. He leaned in slightly. "Lieutenant, if we go in there and the terrain shifts, the fire behaves unpredictably, or that thermal reading is a hostile, people will die. I don't care how many flight hours you have. It's not a controlled environment. It's not a simulation. It's a canyon full of fire, rock, smoke, and collapsing trees. Understand?" Mara met his gaze without flinching. "I understand, sir, and I'll do it anyway." Calloway paused. For a moment it looked like he might argue. Instead, he stepped back, his jaw tightening. "Good. Then you're leading. You're my primary pilot. I don't care if anyone else objects. You take the lead and I'll follow your commands." A whisper ran through the gathered crew. Not one expected a young woman to step forward in that moment. Many assumed their lead pilot would be a grizzled man who had survived more missions than he could count. And yet here she was, calm, composed, and apparently unshakable. One of the SEAL instructors muttered to another, "She's different." The other shook his head. "Different doesn't survive this canyon." But Mara wasn't listening to them. She focused on the mission tablet she had picked up from a nearby console. She tapped a few times, bringing up the topographical maps and thermal overlays of Rockbridge Canyon. Her fingers danced across the screen with practiced efficiency, calculating wind patterns, fire trajectories, and potential landing zones. "Sir," she said, pointing at a section of the canyon, "if we approach from the west ridge, we can use the canyon crosswinds to stabilize the bird. I've calculated the turbulence up to a tolerance of 12 seconds per segment, enough to get skids down safely. But we'll need to drop altitude quickly to reach the survivors before the thermal activity moves them into the fire path." Calloway's eyes narrowed. "You sure about that? This wind data is barely holding. The smoke density alone could collapse your instruments in less than 60 seconds. "I'm sure," Mara said. She didn't hesitate. She had been trained to make split-second decisions in far worse conditions, and she had lived to fly again because of it. The captain stared at her, studying her profile. Then his jaw tightened. "All right, Lieutenant, I'll trust your calculations. But understand this, the moment we touch down, the clock starts. You have to get them out before." He stopped mid-sentence as a young communications officer ran toward them, face pale. "Sir, update from the field," the officer panted. "Thermal imagery confirms multiple survivors. 3 are confirmed military, but there's a 4th signature, and it's unusual." Calloway's heart skipped a beat. He moved closer to the screen, frowning. "Unusual." "Yes, sir. The beacon is personal, classified. It's linked to a clearance only one person in this room has. Calloway froze. A moment of disbelief passed over his face, the kind no one had ever seen in the presence of others. Mara noticed it immediately, her instincts kicking in. Something personal was at stake. "Who is it?" she asked softly, almost cautiously. Calloway exhaled sharply, voice low and rough. "My brother." Mara's hand went to her chest, not from fear but from a sudden, sharp awareness of what was now in motion. The mission had just escalated from life or death to personal. She could feel the weight in the room shift instantly. The crew's murmurs died down, replaced by a thick, tense silence. The SEALs and medics around them now realized that the man they had revered for years was suddenly human, vulnerable, fearful, and desperate. Calloway's gaze fell to Mara. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Her steady presence seemed to anchor him in a way no one else could. But before anyone could absorb the gravity of the revelation, the alarms blared even louder. The battalion chief burst in, shouting over the chaos. "The crash site's fuel tank is heating fast. If we don't launch within the next 30 minutes, it's going to explode." Chaos erupted. Soldiers rushed, radios screamed, and the hangar seemed to vibrate with tension. Mara's calmness, however, cut through the noise like a blade. She walked to the mission tablet again, analyzing, calculating, plotting escape routes, approach angles, and landing zones. Calloway watched her, stunned. You're actually plotting this on the fly?" "Yes, sir," Mara replied, never taking her eyes off the tablet. "The crosswinds, the smoke density, thermal shifts, I've accounted for them. We can fly in, land, and get everyone out safely if we act now." The captain's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're assuming a lot." Mara looked up, her eyes met his unwavering. "Sir, I'm not assuming, I'm calculating. I've flown through worse. I know this canyon, and I'm confident we can do this." A heavy silence fell. Calloway studied her for a long, tense moment, measuring, weighing. Then finally he nodded. "All right," he said. His voice was low, dangerous, but there was a flicker of something unspoken, trust. "You lead, we follow, let's move." The room seemed to exhale collectively. For the first time, the tension in the hangar shifted from fear to a brittle, anxious hope. But just as the team scrambled toward the aircraft, a new alert crackled through the radio. "Commander, new heat signatures detected near the crash site," the voice on the other end reported, trembling. "It's moving. We don't know what it is, sir. Could be wildlife, could be something else." Mara froze for a fraction of a second. Her eyes narrowed at the screen, fingers hovering over the controls. Calloway's face hardened. "Lieutenant Holt," he said, his voice low, edged with steel, "do you see this?" "I do, sir," Mara replied. Her voice was steady, but her jaw tightened. She had anticipated danger, but not this. This was unpredictable, and in moments like this, unpredictability killed people. She tapped the tablet rapidly, overlaying satellite data, thermal scans, and recent wind shifts. The heat signature moved in a way that was erratic, almost intelligent. Not like an animal, not like debris caught in fire. Something was alive and moving near the crash site, and it was getting closer to the survivors. Calloway's fists clenched. "Then we don't wait, we fly now." Mara took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline hit her system. The entire hangar seemed to blur, the alarms fading into the background. There was only the mission, only the survivors, only the impossible task ahead. She turned toward the helicopters lined up on the tarmac, engines humming, heat radiating, propellers cutting through the rising dust. She stepped forward, boots clicking against the metal floor. Every eye in the hangar followed her. Whispers turned into silent awe. This woman, calm and precise, was about to lead them into a firestorm. And in that instant, the entire crew realized something terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Mara Holt was the only one capable of pulling them out alive. But as the rotors began to spin and the team prepared to lift off, a distant, muffled roar echoed through the canyon, faint but unmistakable. The sound carried a weight no one could ignore. Something was coming, something massive, something that might be waiting for them when they arrived. And in that moment, Mara Holt didn't flinch. She simply adjusted her helmet, gripped the controls, and prepared to fly straight into the unknown. The canyon awaited, and it wasn't going to make it easy. Mara Holt climbed into the cockpit, the metallic scent of the helicopter mixing with adrenaline and smoke from the distant wildfire. Her fingers hovered over the controls for a heartbeat, tracing familiar contours as if the machine itself were an extension of her body. The team scrambled around the aircraft, strapping gear, securing medics, and checking radios. Outside, the sun began to dip behind the canyon ridges, casting long shadows over the rugged terrain, shadows that twisted like fingers, warning of danger in every crevice. Calloway followed closely behind, boarding the helicopter with the speed and precision of a man who had trained for this exact moment hundreds of times in simulations. And yet, this was nothing like training. His brother's life depended on their success, and the weight of that knowledge pressed down on him with suffocating intensity. "Status check," Mara barked, scanning the instruments. The fuel levels were critical. Visibility was reduced to near zero at higher altitudes due to the smoke, and the canyon winds were already unpredictable, whipping through the narrow walls like wild animals. Lieutenant Darnell, the co-pilot, swallowed hard. "West Ridge approach, ma'am. Crosswinds calculated. Thermal pockets appearing, fluctuating at 22 knots. "Copy that," Mara replied. Her voice was steady, but inside, every nerve felt alive with tension. She could feel the heat from the canyon searing against the fuselage even through the reinforced windows. Flames licked at the ridges like molten snakes, threatening to leap across the gap and consume the aircraft in seconds. Calloway, sitting in the rear, tightened his harness. He studied the team silently, nodding the fear and determination mingling on each face. None of them had expected to be this close to disaster, yet all were ready to act. And Mara, she was their anchor, calm, unflinching, calculating. Her presence was a quiet force that commanded attention without a word. The rotors whirred to life. The helicopter lifted off, kicking up dust and embers from the scorched tarmac. The hangar disappeared beneath them as the canyon stretched ahead, a labyrinth of jagged rock, fire, and smoke. Mara's fingers moved over the controls with a rhythm honed by years of experience. Every adjustment was precise, every angle calculated to account for turbulence, crosswinds, and shifting thermal currents. "Approaching the ridge," she announced. The wind buffeted the helicopter violently. "Hold tight, we're going in fast." Calloway leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. "Thermal signatures." Mara tapped the screen. The heat readings flickered as they climbed higher. 3 survivors confirmed at the crash site. 4th signature unidentified, possibly injured, moving, could be trapped under debris. A murmur passed through the team. No one knew who or what the 4th was, not yet. As they approached the canyon entrance, the wind screamed like a living thing. Smoke billowed in chaotic columns, making the cliffs appear as shifting shadows. Mara adjusted altitude, tilting the helicopter to ride the crosswinds. The craft groaned under the stress, but she kept it steady. 5 minutes to sight, she said, her voice clipped precise. Her eyes darted between the instruments and the canyon below. Visibility dropping, thermal pockets spiking, brace for turbulence. The helicopter lurched violently, throwing the crew against their harnesses. Sparks flickered across the console as heat readings spiked. Calloway gritted his teeth, gripping the rail. "Stay focused," he shouted over the roar of the rotors. "We've got people depending on us." Below, the canyon walls twisted like molten metal under the orange glow of the wildfire. Trees toppled in sheets of flame, sending embers cascading like deadly rain. Mara's heart pounded, but she didn't hesitate. Every decision was methodical: altitude, angle, speed, wind correction. She flew like a ghost threading a needle through chaos. 3 minutes, Darnell called out, voice tight. "We're approaching the site, smoke thickening, heat signature intensifying. Mara's fingers tightened on the controls. She could see the wreckage below, a tangle of mangled metal, blackened trees, and rolling smoke. Shadows danced across the debris, hiding the injured, the trapped, and whatever else the thermal feed had picked up. "Landing zone?" Calloway asked, voice taut. Mara scanned the area quickly, eyes flicking between smoke columns and uneven terrain. Left skid on rock shelf, right skid near collapsed ridge. Hover at 30 feet, then descend rapidly. We've got 30 seconds before thermals shift. Any delay and the fire spreads across the landing zone. The helicopter shuddered violently as Mara executed the maneuver. The rotors flailed in the crosswinds, the craft swaying like a leaf in a storm. Sparks from nearby trees hit the windshield. Calloway's brother shifted uncomfortably in his harness, groaning. "Hold it steady," Calloway barked, gripping his seat. "If that bird goes down." Mara didn't answer. She was too focused. One false move now and they'd all die. One precise move and lives could be saved. They descended into the canyon. Smoke engulfed the fuselage, visibility dropping to a few feet. Mara relied on instruments, trusting the calculations she had made moments earlier. The thermal readings flickered. 1, 2, a third spike surged dangerously near the debris. Something or someone was moving within the wreckage. "Identifying fourth life sign," she muttered. "It's close to the tail rotor, could be trapped, might be alive barely." Calloway's gaze hardened. "We're going in anyway." Mara adjusted the collective, dropping the helicopter into a hover above the precarious terrain. Heat from the flames licked at the fuselage, metal groaning under the stress. Embers blew across the cockpit, leaving streaks on the glass like molten scratches. "Skids down," Mara announced. "Prepare to extract, move fast." The crew snapped into action. Calloway moved toward the exit, eyes locked on his brother. Medics prepared stretchers, cords, and harnesses. The canyon seemed to close around them, smoke curling like claws. But then a deep, resonating crack shook the canyon. Dust and small rocks rained from above. The ridge Mara had calculated as stable gave way in fragments. "Hold on," Mara shouted, twisting the helicopter violently as a column of burning debris tumbled past. The aircraft shuddered, metal bending under the stress. The canyon seemed alive, threatening to crush them all. Calloway's voice cut through the chaos. "Lieutenant Holt, can you keep her steady?" Mara's jaw set. "I will keep her steady." The helicopter swung like a pendulum, hovering precariously above the crash site. Below, the survivors stirred, struggling against debris and smoke. The fourth life sign, small, moving erratically, seemed almost fragile against the inferno surrounding it. Mara's fingers danced over the controls. Adjustments, minute yet precise, kept the helicopter from tipping, from sliding into the canyon wall. Every second counted. Every heartbeat mattered. "Almost there," she muttered. 2 minutes, everyone ready." Calloway's brother, now visible, shouted in pain from the wreckage. Calloway moved to reach him, but his grip faltered on the jagged metal. "I can't," he started. "I've got this," Mara shouted, overriding his hesitation. Her voice carried authority that brooked no argument. With surgical precision, she maneuvered the helicopter, skids scraping the rocky ground as heat flared around them. The medics leapt into action, securing the injured. Calloway's brother groaned but was lifted clear. The fourth life sign, revealed now as a civilian trapped under twisted metal, flailed weakly. Mara adjusted the helicopter yet again, guiding them into the skid's shadow, lowering carefully. A rock shelf cracked beneath the fourth survivor. The heat was rising exponentially. Mara felt the helicopter's frame vibrating violently. Flames licked the skids. "Move," Calloway yelled. "Now." The medics managed to free the civilian just as the canyon seemed to groan and shift again. Mara yanked the collective upward, climbing just as a wall of flames surged toward the landing zone. The rotors screamed, the helicopter shaking like a leaf in a storm. They cleared the canyon just as another fire column erupted from the ground below, sending sparks and smoke twisting into the air. Everyone inside the aircraft gasped, sweat and soot mingling on their faces. Mara's fingers hovered for a moment over the controls, checking the instruments, heart hammering. She exhaled slowly, just enough to steady herself. But before she could allow herself relief, a crackling transmission came through the radio. Command, multiple heat signatures moving toward the ridge. Not sure what they are, could be wildlife or worse. Mara's eyes narrowed, scanning the canyon ahead. The helicopter pitched slightly under the turbulence. The canyon was far from safe. Calloway's voice, tight with tension, broke the silence. "Lieutenant, what now?" Mara didn't answer immediately. Her eyes scanned the instruments, the ridge, the smoke, the moving heat signatures. Something told her that this canyon had more surprises in store. Her fingers gripped the controls tighter, her jaw clenched. "We fly," she said finally, her voice calm, unshakable, but carrying the weight of what was to come. "And we get everyone out alive." The canyon stretched ahead, twisting and roaring, alive with fire and danger. And Mara Holt, against all odds, prepared to face it head-on. But just as the helicopter cleared the ridge, a new threat emerged from the smoke, one that Mara had not anticipated, and one that could change everything in an instant. The canyon stretched before them like a furnace waiting to swallow them whole. Flames licked the jagged cliffs on either side, sparks twisting upward in smoke-choked columns. Mara Holt guided the helicopter with surgical precision, but the heat and turbulence pushed the limits of the aircraft, rattling instruments and nerves alike. Every second, the canyon seemed more alive, more dangerous, and the unknown thermal signatures moved unpredictably beneath the smoke, each one a potential threat. Commander Calloway's jaw was set tight. His eyes flicked to his brother strapped into the medevac harness, pale and groaning from a broken leg and minor burns. The man he had trained to protect all his life now depended on the very risk he had always mastered. The weight of that realization pressed on him like a vice. Mara's calm voice cut through the roaring rotors. "We have visual on the survivors. 3 are stable. The 4th is still trapped under debris near the tail rotor. Extraction is going to be tight." Calloway gritted his teeth. "Then we do this fast, no hesitation." The helicopter dipped into a hover over the crash site, the metal frame groaning as it struggled against the updrafts of heat. Below, the survivors moved, coughing and shielding their faces from the smoke. Mara adjusted the craft to the skids, Shadow careful not to destabilize the precarious perch. "Skids down," she called, voice steady. "Medics go." The medics leapt into action. Calloway sprinted toward his brother, reaching out to help him to the skids. The younger man looked up, eyes wide with recognition and panic. "Nate," he croaked, voice trembling. I thought. "Not now," Calloway barked, grabbing him under the arms and guiding him toward safety. "We move now." As the first survivors were lifted into the helicopter, the thermal readings spiked again. The unknown heat signatures were moving closer, faster than the team anticipated. Mara's hands danced over the controls, balancing the helicopter in the deadly air currents. Flames curled around the tail rotor. Sparks flicked against the windshield. Every second was measured in life and death. One of the medics shouted, "We've got the 4th, but she's pinned under the tail rotor." Mara's eyes narrowed. The figure beneath the twisted metal wasn't a soldier. Not by the shape of the uniform, not by the fragility of movement. She didn't need the instruments to know that. Calloway froze mid-step. His face went pale, a muscle in his jaw twitching. Mara noticed it instantly. The man who had faced war zones, ambushes, and death hundreds of times was suddenly exposed, raw with emotion. "Sir?" Mara asked softly, cutting through the roar of the rotors. Calloway swallowed, voice tight. It's my brother, my younger brother, Lucas." Mara's calm exterior faltered for just a heartbeat. She had known the mission had personal stakes for him, but seeing the intensity of raw fear in a man who was usually steel himself was something else entirely. Every muscle in Calloway's body was focused on Lucas, on the thought of failure, on the idea that he might lose him here, in the fire before his eyes. "Then we do this right," Mara said, voice firm. "But you trust me to keep everyone alive, including him, do you?" Calloway's eyes met hers, conflicted. Pride, fear, desperation, and trust warred in his gaze. Finally, he nodded sharply. "I trust you, just don't fail him." Mara's jaw tightened. "I won't." The medics and crew worked like a well-oiled machine. They lifted Lucas carefully, sliding him onto the skid with precision. The unknown fourth survivor, a civilian contractor trapped beneath mangled metal, struggled and cried out. Mara adjusted the collective, keeping the helicopter steady despite the twisting smoke and shifting winds. The civilian's weight shifted suddenly, throwing the helicopter into a dangerous tilt. Mara corrected immediately, balancing the craft against the deadly canyon updrafts. Sparks from nearby burning debris flicked across the windshield. Flames roared closer. Calloway reached forward, stabilizing his brother. "Lucas, hold on, almost there." The civilian screamed as a twisted beam threatened to pin her further. One of the medics shouted, "We need another hand, now." Mara tilted the helicopter slightly, giving the medics better leverage. Sweat streamed down her forehead. Every nerve was on high alert. She could feel the craft's metal frame vibrating under the stress, the rotors struggling against the rising heat. Finally, with coordinated effort, the civilian was freed and lifted aboard. The helicopter shuddered violently as they cleared the debris. Mara adjusted immediately, fighting the crosswinds and thermal pockets to stabilize the craft. Calloway sat back, finally exhaling. His brother was safe, the civilian secured, and the team alive for now. But the danger wasn't over. The canyon still roared around them, smoke and flames twisting unpredictably, the unknown thermal signatures still moving in the shadows below. "Status?" Calloway asked, voice low but tense. Mara scanned the instruments. "All survivors on board, aircraft stable, fuel levels critical, but we've got a clear path to extraction if we move fast. Thermal signatures still active near ridge. Could be wildlife or something else." Calloway's jaw tightened. "Then we don't wait." The helicopter lifted, engines screaming, rotors cutting through the dense, smoke-filled air. Below, the canyon seemed alive, shifting, dangerous, unpredictable. Mara guided the aircraft with precise adjustments, keeping skids clear of flames and debris. The crew clung to their harnesses, hearts racing, adrenaline surging. But just as relief began to whisper through the cabin, a massive rumble echoed through the canyon. Dust, rocks, and flames erupted from a ridge, tumbling toward them like an avalanche of fire. Mara yanked the collective, twisting the helicopter to avoid the collapsing terrain. The rotors groaned under the strain. Flames licked at the fuselage, sparks showering the cockpit. Calloway grabbed a support rail, muscles taut, eyes wide. "Lieutenant Holt," he shouted, "we can't hold this forever." Mara's eyes were locked on the instruments, calculating angles, wind speed, and elevation. "Just a few more seconds," she yelled, voice sharp with focus. "We're almost clear." The ridge continued to collapse, debris and embers cascading. The helicopter wavered dangerously. One wrong move, and they would be crushed or consumed in flames. Mara made a split-second decision, banking sharply to the left, skimming a rocky outcrop, and using the canyon winds to propel them upward. Sparks hit the windshield. Flames flared around them. The helicopter cleared the immediate danger by inches. Calloway's grip on the rail loosened slightly as he exhaled, sweat and soot streaking his face. He looked at Mara with a mixture of awe and disbelief. You did it," he said, voice almost a whisper. Mara didn't answer, she didn't celebrate. There was no time. The canyon wasn't done with them. The unknown heat signatures still moved below, and the wildfire's path was unpredictable, shifting by the second. "Everyone check in," Mara commanded, scanning the cabin. "Status." "Alive," came the replies. Medics, crew, Calloway, and even his brother, all accounted for, but the tension remained thick as smoke. And then the radio crackled. A voice, distant, urgent, and trembling, broke the temporary calm. "Command, multiple heat signatures approaching the ridge too large for wildlife. Unknown, repeat, unknown." Mara's jaw tightened. She adjusted the controls, eyes narrowing at the smoke-filled canyon ahead. The unknown threat wasn't gone. It was moving closer, faster, and it was about to intersect with their extraction path. Calloway leaned forward, voice taut. "Lieutenant, what is it?" Mara didn't answer immediately. Her eyes scanned the instruments, the thermal readings, the canyon walls. Something told her this canyon had one more surprise in store, one more test, one more risk that could decide life or death for everyone aboard. Her hands gripped the controls tighter, her breath steadied. "We fly," she said at last, "and we get everyone out alive. Whatever happens next, we adapt, we survive, we do not fail." The canyon stretched before them, alive with fire, smoke, and danger. Mara Holt's eyes were fixed ahead, unflinching, as she prepared to face whatever came next. And somewhere in the twisting smoke, the unknown heat signatures moved faster, closing in on the helicopter, ready to strike at the moment they least expected. The canyon stretched beneath them like an infernal labyrinth, molten light shimmering off jagged cliffs. Mara Holt tightened her grip on the collective, eyes scanning the shifting thermal overlays and wind currents displayed on her instruments. Each second felt like an eternity. Each adjustment could mean life or death. Flames licked at the cliff walls, sparks showering the helicopter, as if the canyon itself were punishing them for daring to enter. Calloway sat behind her, gripping the rail with white-knuckled intensity. His brother lay on a stretcher, bandaged and groaning from the injuries sustained in the crash. Sweat streaked Calloway's face, mixing with soot and ash from the rising inferno below. He had seen death countless times in war zones, yet nothing had prepared him for the raw, unrelenting chaos of a canyon consumed by wildfire. "Lieutenant Holt," Calloway said, voice tight, "status." 2 minutes to the ridge," Mara replied, eyes fixed ahead, tracking the thermal signatures moving unpredictably through the smoke. Wind turbulence at 15 knots, visibility dropping to 20 meters. Secondary ignition points detected near the landing zone. We have a very narrow window to extract everyone safely. The medics and crew inside the helicopter shifted nervously, bracing against the straining harnesses. Their faces, streaked with soot, reflected a combination of fear, determination, and awe. They were staring at Mara Holt, a young woman who had quietly risen from the corner of the hangar hours earlier, now commanding the lives of everyone aboard with unwavering authority. A sudden gust slammed the helicopter sideways, tilting it dangerously as a burst of flame from the canyon wall spiraled toward them. Mara corrected immediately, banking sharply and dipping into the relative shelter of a rocky overhang. Sparks struck the fuselage, sizzling against metal. Calloway's voice rose over the din of the rotors. "This is insane. You're insane." "I'm focused," Mara shot back, voice calm, tight with intensity. "We do this carefully or we don't do it at all." The canyon walls twisted and narrowed, creating a gauntlet that required the pilots to thread the helicopter through narrow corridors of fire, rock, and smoke. Mara adjusted the pitch and yaw, every movement deliberate, precise, almost surgical. The rotors screamed, vibrating through the aircraft as if protesting the sheer danger of the flight. Below, the wildfire churned like a living beast, licking upward at cliffs and sending columns of embers into the sky. Thermal readings spiked, some far exceeding safe thresholds. The unknown heat signatures moved with deliberate speed, merging into one another, and their patterns suggested intelligence, something alive and hunting. Mara's heart thumped, not with fear but with hyperfocus. She had flown combat sorties in hostile zones, braved anti-aircraft fire, dodged RPGs and missiles. This was different. This was the sky no one wanted to enter, untamed, unpredictable, and impossible to fully map. Approaching landing zone, Mara called. She guided the helicopter downward, skids just above the rocky ground, over uneven terrain pocked with smoldering boulders. Prepare to extract. Everyone ready. Calloway's eyes met hers briefly. Ready. His voice trembled, betraying a rare vulnerability. Let's bring them home. The medics leapt into action, grabbing stretchers, cords, and harnesses. Below, the survivors stirred, coughing and shielding their faces from the smoke. The unknown fourth life sign moved erratically near the tail rotor, partially obscured by debris. Mara adjusted the collective to compensate for the sudden shift in weight. The helicopter rocked violently, sparks hitting the cockpit. Skids down, Mara announced, voice sharp. Extract now. Calloway rushed forward to assist his brother onto the skid. The young man's eyes were wide, panic mingling with relief. Nate, I thought I was done for, he groaned. Not today, Calloway barked, hoisting him into the helicopter. The civilian, trapped beneath twisted metal, screamed for help. Medics coordinated, leveraging her weight to lift her toward the helicopter. Mara tilted the craft slightly, keeping it balanced despite the forceful crosswinds. Flames surged from nearby debris, licking dangerously close. Sparks streaked across the windshield, and the cockpit instruments flickered under the heat. Almost clear, Mara shouted. Hold steady. The helicopter shuddered violently, skidding slightly as a sudden gust hit. The canyon seemed to pulse around them, alive and threatening. Mara adjusted instantly, banking to avoid a column of burning debris cascading from the cliffs. Secondary ignition, Darnell shouted. We've got fuel pockets flaring near the extraction point. Move, Mara commanded. Lift now. The aircraft rose, engines screaming as the helicopter cleared the immediate fire zone. Heat blasted the fuselage, igniting embers that streaked across the cockpit. Calloway gritted his teeth, eyes wide, watching as the canyon tried to claim them. Below, the wildfire twisted and roared, the smoke thick and choking. The unknown heat signatures moved faster, converging toward the ridge where they intended to escape. Mara adjusted the angle and throttle, keeping the helicopter steady. Every second was measured, every movement critical. The medics secured the last survivor. Calloway reached for the civilian, ensuring she was stable. Mara lifted the helicopter slightly, navigating the narrow window between flames and rocks. The canyon's roar was deafening, and the sky seemed to darken under the smoke. Almost there, Mara muttered. Keep your heads down, one wrong move. A sudden, massive rumble echoed through the canyon. The ridge above them began to collapse, sending rocks and fire spiraling downward. Mara twisted the controls violently, banking to the side as debris slammed into the canyon walls. Sparks flew into the cockpit, and a large ember struck the fuselage with a metallic hiss. Calloway's grip tightened on the rail. Lieutenant, we're not going to make it. We make it, Mara shouted, voice unwavering. Her eyes scanned the instruments, tracking every shift in wind, heat, and terrain. The helicopter wavered dangerously, tilting as flames flared closer. Mara's calculations were precise, her movements exact. The skids scraped the rocky ledge, and the helicopter lurched violently but held. The ridge collapsed completely behind them, a wall of fire and rock roaring upward as if the canyon itself were alive. Breathless, sweat dripping, Calloway glanced at Mara. His face was a mix of awe and fear. You're insane. Focused, she replied, gripping the collective tighter. Her eyes never left the path ahead. The unknown heat signatures below were still moving, still closing in. Mara adjusted course, climbing higher to avoid the rising smoke columns. The rotors screamed, metal groaning under stress. Sparks flared, smoke engulfed the fuselage, and the canyon seemed determined to destroy them. Status, Calloway barked, voice tight with tension. All survivors secured, Mara reported. Aircraft stable. Path to extraction clear for now, but thermal signatures approaching fast. We'll need to navigate carefully through the next ridge. Calloway's gaze fell on his brother, safe but shaken. He exhaled, a mixture of relief and fear. "You've kept us alive so far," he said, voice rough. Mara didn't respond. She was already calculating the next move, the next ridge, the next challenge. The canyon was far from conquered, and the wildfire continued to twist unpredictably below. And then from the radio, a voice crackled urgently. "Lieutenant Holt, multiple heat signatures converging on the ridge. Unknown, repeat, unknown. Recommend immediate evasive maneuvers." Mara's jaw tightened. She adjusted the collective, banking the helicopter sharply. The canyon stretched ahead, alive with fire, smoke, and deadly unknowns. She took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the path ahead. The helicopter wobbled slightly under the thermal currents, but she held it steady. The sky no one wanted to enter had them now, and the canyon was far from done testing them. The canyon walls roared like a living thing, cracking and shifting under the wildfire's relentless assault. Mara Holt's knuckles whitened around the collective as the helicopter twisted violently in the updrafts, the rotors screaming against the inferno. Sparks streaked the cockpit windshield, landing like molten rain, and the fuselage trembled under the heat's assault. Every instrument flickered, as if warning her that failure here meant death. Calloway leaned forward, eyes locked on his brother lying strapped in the medevac harness. His jaw was tight, teeth clenched. He had faced ambushes in hostile countries, dodged explosions, and survived firefights, but this canyon was unlike anything he had imagined. Here, death wasn't predictable, it wasn't fair, and it didn't wait. Mara's voice cut through the roar of the rotors. Thermal readings are spiking again, wind currents shifting unpredictably. Ridge ahead collapsing in 3, 2, 1, brace. The helicopter lurched violently as a cascade of rock and fire tumbled from above. Embers and smoke tore across the cabin, stinging eyes and coating instruments in ash. Mara twisted the collective, banking sharply to the right while simultaneously adjusting the yaw to avoid a massive boulder falling toward the landing zone. Sparks struck metal, and the cabin shuddered as if the aircraft itself were screaming under the strain. "Lieutenant status," Calloway shouted, gripping the support rail as the helicopter swayed dangerously. "All survivors secured," Mara reported. Her voice was steady, precise. "Aircraft integrity at 78%, thermal signatures approaching from the lower ridge, moving faster than expected." Calloway's heart skipped. "Unknown heat signatures." "Yes," Mara replied. Her eyes narrowed on the instruments. "Could be wildlife, could be something else. Either way, they're closing in on our path." The canyon constricted suddenly, walls rising sharply, fire licking the edges. Mara's hands flew over the controls, performing micro-adjustments that only a pilot with her experience could manage under these conditions. The helicopter tilted violently as the winds shifted, threatening to throw them into the jagged rocks below. "Brace for turbulence," Mara shouted. Inside, the crew tightened their grips, hearts racing, stomachs dropping. The medics clutched their stretchers. Calloway's brother groaned, pain etched across his face, but the younger man's eyes were wide, staring at the inferno around them. Mara banked sharply, skimming along the canyon wall, navigating a thin corridor of smoke, fire, and falling debris. The rotors screamed, metal groaning in protest. Sparks streaked the cockpit as the helicopter passed perilously close to flames shooting from the canyon floor. A sudden rumble echoed through the air. The canyon wall above them gave way, sending a torrent of burning debris spiraling downward. Mara reacted instantly, twisting the helicopter violently, dodging fragments that could have crushed the aircraft in an instant. Calloway's voice rose over the roar. "Lieutenant Holt, that was too close." "We survive," Mara replied, voice calm but edged with intensity. "Focus on keeping stable." The unknown heat signatures moved erratically through the canyon smoke. They weren't just moving, they were converging, circling toward the ridge where the helicopter was attempting to escape. Mara's eyes flicked across the thermal display. The readings were unlike anything she had trained for: fast, intelligent, unpredictable. "Secondary ignition," Darnell shouted, voice tense. "Fuel pockets flaring near the ridge. We can't hover for long." Mara adjusted the collective, banking the helicopter steeply to avoid the rising columns of fire. Sparks hit the windshield, embers swirling like fireflies. The helicopter groaned, vibrating under the extreme stress. Calloway gritted his teeth. "Lieutenant, if we don't make it past this ridge—" "We will make it," Mara shouted, overriding his panic. Her eyes were laser-focused on the instruments and the canyon ahead. Every calculation, every movement, every split-second decision mattered. One wrong move, and they would be consumed by fire or crushed under falling rock. The helicopter rose sharply over a narrow ridge, clearing a patch of canyon floor briefly illuminated by the inferno below. The unknown thermal signatures were closing fast, moving like shadowy predators. Mara felt the hairs on her arms stand on end, but her hands remained steady, executing maneuvers with precision honed over countless combat missions. "Hold tight," she yelled. "We're cutting through the next thermal pocket. Brace." The helicopter lurched violently, twisted, and rocked as the thermal currents ripped through the canyon. Flames surged up around them, sparks raining across the cockpit. Calloway's brother cried out as the harness rattled against him. Mara's jaw set, her entire focus poured into keeping the aircraft steady. "Almost clear," she muttered. "2 more ridges, then extraction path." But the canyon wasn't finished. A massive plume of fire erupted from a collapsed ridge, forming a wall that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. The unknown heat signatures surged beneath it, converging like a predator circling prey. Mara's mind raced, calculating trajectory, wind currents, rotor stability, and clearance simultaneously. "Evasive maneuvers," Calloway shouted. Mara didn't hesitate. With surgical precision, she twisted the helicopter, banking sharply to the left while climbing vertically. Sparks streaked across the windshield, flames licked dangerously close to the skids, and metal groaned under the stress. Every second felt like an hour. The medics and crew held their breath, gripping harnesses for dear life. Calloway's face was pale, eyes wide, every muscle taut with tension. His brother's breathing was shallow, eyes wide with terror. And then Mara executed a maneuver so precise, so daring, it seemed impossible. She threaded the helicopter through a narrow canyon slit, skimming the rocky walls while avoiding flames and falling debris. The unknown thermal signatures surged past below, missing them by mere meters. Sparks erupted as metal and flame collided just beneath the skids. Calloway let out a low whistle of disbelief. "I can't believe we made it." Mara didn't answer. She scanned the canyon ahead. One ridge remained before they could escape, one ridge and the extraction point. But the unknown heat signatures weren't done. They moved faster, angrier, converging with a purpose. "Final ridge," Mara muttered. "Stay ready. One wrong move and—" A massive rumble shook the canyon. Rocks dislodged from above, cascading downward in sheets. Flames roared like a living beast. The helicopter tilted violently, skidding dangerously close to the canyon wall. Mara's fingers flew over the controls, micro-adjustments keeping them aloft by mere inches. Calloway's voice was tight with panic. "Lieutenant Holt, hold her steady. We're not getting another chance." "I've got this," Mara shouted, voice calm but filled with raw intensity. She twisted, banked, and powered the helicopter through the collapsing ridge. Sparks showered the fuselage, flames licked the rotors, and the canyon seemed to scream around them. For a moment, suspended between fire and falling rock, time seemed to freeze. Mara's focus sharpened to a razor's edge. Every instrument, every calculation, every movement was a thread holding life together. And then they cleared the ridge. The canyon opened ahead, smoke rising but the immediate threat behind them. The unknown thermal signatures slowed, momentarily stalled by the ridge's natural barrier. Mara adjusted the collective, stabilizing the helicopter. The crew exhaled collectively, faces pale and streaked with soot. Calloway's grip on the rail loosened slightly as he exhaled. His brother blinked in disbelief, alive, shaken, but unharmed. But Mara didn't allow herself relief. She scanned the instruments. Flames still burned unpredictably below. Thermal readings indicated more movement, more unknowns. The canyon was far from conquered, and the wildfire's fury continued to twist unpredictably. Her fingers tightened on the controls. She had kept them alive this far, but the final stretch was coming. Extraction wasn't guaranteed. Survival required perfection, and she knew the canyon wasn't done testing them yet. The helicopter cut through the smoke toward a faint clearing beyond the canyon, the last chance for safety. Mara's eyes narrowed, jaw set. Every second, every maneuver, every heartbeat mattered. The canyon had thrown everything at them, and Mara Holt was determined to survive, no matter what the fire, the rocks, or the unknown forces ahead had in store. The canyon seemed endless, twisting like a serpent with fire for scales and smoke for breath. Mara Holt's eyes were locked on the instruments, fingers a blur across the controls. The helicopter's rotors screamed in protest, slicing through heat and wind with every ounce of force they could muster. Sparks flickered across the cockpit like molten rain, the fuselage trembling under the assault of thermal currents and embers. Calloway leaned forward, sweat and soot streaking his face, white-knuckled on the support rail. His brother lay strapped in the medevac harness, eyes wide, shaking, but alive. Calloway's military instinct screamed to protect him, yet he was powerless in this inferno, reliant entirely on Mara Holt. The weight of that truth pressed against him like the canyon walls themselves. "Lieutenant," he said, voice tight with tension, "what's the plan for the ridge ahead? Visibility's almost zero." Mara's jaw tightened. "We thread the ridge gap, hold as steady as possible. Thermal pockets are spiking, crosswinds unpredictable. One mistake and we either hit rock or flame." Below, the wildfire churned, a living entity that seemed intent on consuming everything. Columns of smoke twisted upward, embers spiraled like fireflies on a rampage, and the heat made the air shimmer. The unknown heat signatures moved again, faster this time, converging toward their extraction path. Mara glanced at the thermal overlay, multiple moving targets, too precise for wildlife, too chaotic for stationary fire. Something was tracking them. Calloway's voice rose, unknown signatures now. "Yes," Mara replied, voice tight with focus. "We'll deal with them while keeping everyone alive. No hesitation." The canyon walls compressed suddenly, forcing Mara to maneuver the helicopter into a narrow corridor. Flames surged from both sides, embers striking the fuselage with sizzling intensity. The rotors tilted violently as updrafts whipped the craft unpredictably. "Brace," Mara shouted. The cabin rattled violently. Medics and crew clutched their harnesses, teeth gritted, hearts hammering. Calloway's brother groaned as the stretcher shifted slightly under the turbulence. Mara twisted the collective sharply, banking the helicopter to the left to avoid a collapsing rock face. Sparks showered the windshield, and embers spiraled inside the cabin. "Almost at the ridge," Mara called, scanning the thermal readings. "Hold tight and stay sharp." A massive flame plume erupted from the canyon floor, shooting toward them like molten missiles. Mara banked hard, skimming the rocky walls, keeping the helicopter just above the smoke and fire. The unknown heat signatures surged beneath them, moving with unnerving speed, tracking every shift of the aircraft. "Lieutenant Holt, we can't keep dodging like this," Calloway yelled. "If they catch us." "I said hold steady," Mara snapped. Her voice was calm, unflinching, but razor-sharp. Every micro-adjustment she made balanced lives against the chaos below. One wrong calculation, and the canyon would claim them all. The helicopter tilted violently again as an updraft threw it sideways. Sparks and embers streaked past. Mara's hands flew over the controls, countering the turbulence with expert precision. Every second stretched into eternity. The ridge gap appeared ahead, a narrow, sloping corridor of rock, smoke, and flame. Mara's eyes scanned the instruments, calculating trajectory, wind currents, rotor tilt, and skids clearance. This was it, the final gauntlet. One mistake now and all would be lost. Calloway gripped the rail, jaw tight. "Lieutenant, this is insane." "We survive," Mara replied simply, voice calm, controlled. "Focus on your breathing. Everyone will make it through if we do this right." The helicopter surged forward, skimming the canyon floor. Heat blasted the fuselage, the rotors groaning under extreme stress. Flames shot up from either side, sparks hitting instruments, metal twisting slightly under pressure. The crew held their breaths collectively, hearts pounding. Below, the unknown heat signatures darted between smoke columns, moving with alarming speed. They weren't animals. Mara knew that instinctively. Something alive, something intelligent, was converging on their path. "Final approach," Mara called, her eyes narrowing, jaw set. "Brace for turbulence, flames, and debris." The helicopter lurched violently, twisting as debris cascaded from a collapsing ridge above. Sparks sizzled across the windshield. Flames surged from the canyon floor, licking toward the skids. Mara banked sharply, threading the helicopter through the narrowest point of the ridge gap. Calloway's brother groaned, clutching the harness. Calloway leaned over him protectively, eyes wide with disbelief at Mara's skill. The canyon seemed to roar, alive, testing every nerve, every ounce of training, every heartbeat. A massive boulder tumbled from above, colliding with a ridge nearby. Mara twisted the helicopter instantly, banking hard to avoid it. Sparks struck metal. Flames surged past the rotors. Instruments flickered. "Almost clear, just a few meters," Mara shouted. The unknown heat signatures moved faster, converging on their position. One appeared beneath a smoke column, moving like a shadow hunting them. Mara adjusted altitude and angle, threading the helicopter perfectly through the ridge gap. The rotors screamed, the fuselage trembled, and the canyon seemed to fight them at every turn. "Hold on," Mara yelled, voice fierce. The helicopter emerged from the gap, skidding past a final column of flame that seemed to reach for them. Sparks streaked across the windshield, flames licked at the tail rotor, and the aircraft shuddered under the extreme heat. Calloway exhaled, gripping the rail so tightly his knuckles whitened. We made it." Mara didn't allow herself relief. She scanned the instruments, eyes narrowing. The canyon below still burned, still twisted, still alive. The unknown heat signatures had not vanished. They were stalled, observing, waiting for the next moment. "Path to extraction clear for now," Mara muttered, voice calm but sharp. "Everyone remains on high alert. One false move beyond this point and—" She didn't finish. The helicopter leveled, engines screaming as they rose above the canyon. Sparks still danced across the fuselage, and the last tendrils of smoke burned the eyes. Every second was a heartbeat suspended between survival and disaster. Calloway finally exhaled fully, eyes still fixed on the canyon floor. His brother looked up at him, pale but alive. Tears streaked through soot on his face. I thought I lost you," he whispered. Calloway's jaw tightened. "Not today, not here." His gaze shifted to Mara. "I don't know how you did it, but you kept us alive, all of us." Mara didn't smile. She never did, not yet. Her eyes remained sharp, scanning the skis, the instruments, the canyon. Survival wasn't guaranteed until they were fully clear. Then the radio crackled, voice urgent, distorted by static. "Lieutenant Holt, new heat signatures detected above the ridge. Multiple, fast-moving, recommend immediate evasive action." Mara's jaw set, her eyes flicked to the readouts. The canyon wasn't done. The unknown forces were regrouping, waiting for the next strike. She tightened her grip on the controls. "Prepare everyone," she said, voice calm, unwavering. "We're not out yet. Whatever's coming, we face it together. No mistakes, no hesitation, move fast, survive faster. The helicopter surged forward, cutting through smoke and embers, engines screaming, rotors slicing through the infernal air. The canyon stretched below like a living beast, flames and rocks twisting in impossible patterns. Mara Holt's eyes were locked ahead, unwavering as the final gauntlet approached, a test of skill, courage, and endurance that would define everything they had fought to survive. The unknown heat signatures advanced, faster, smarter, closing in on them, and the cliffside ridge ahead hid the next, deadliest challenge yet. The canyon stretched like a living furnace beneath Mara Holt, flames twisting and curling with every gust of wind. Sparks streaked across the cockpit windows, scorching metal and burning eyes. The unknown heat signatures, moving with unnerving intelligence, closed in from below and above. Every second, every heartbeat, every microadjustment Mara made held life and death in its balance. Calloway leaned over his brother, gripping the rail. Sweat streaked his face, soot mixed with fear. "Lieutenant Holt, this is insane. We're not going to make it," he shouted, voice cracking. "Yes, we are," Mara snapped, voice calm but sharp, cutting through the roar of the rotors. "Focus on breathing. Focus on survival. We make it out or we fail together." The helicopter pitched violently as an updraft tore through the canyon. Flames surged from both sides, licking the rotors, sparks falling like molten rain. Mara twisted the collective, banking sharply, skimming the cliff walls by inches. The unknown heat signatures darted in the smoke below, converging as if testing her limits, testing their survival. "Final ridge ahead," Mara called. Her eyes narrowed, scanning instruments, thermal readings, and the twisting canyon ahead. One wrong move now would be fatal. The canyon narrowed sharply, a corridor of flame, smoke, and jagged rock. Mara adjusted pitch and yaw, maneuvering with surgical precision. Sparks struck the windshield, the fuselage groaning under extreme heat. She tilted the helicopter to the right to avoid a massive column of fire erupting from the canyon floor. Calloway's voice rose, tight with tension. "We can't hold this, not for long." "We can," Mara shouted. "Trust me, trust yourself, trust the helicopter." The crew braced, hearts hammering. Calloway's brother groaned, shaking but alive, strapped into the stretcher. Medics clutched harnesses, eyes wide. The unknown heat signatures moved faster, closing in like predators in the smoke. Mara's jaw set, mind calculating angles, wind currents, rotor tilt, skids clearance. She had trained for impossible maneuvers, faced fire and gunfire, ambushes and death in foreign lands, but this canyon defied every expectation. A massive boulder tumbled from above, colliding with the canyon wall, sending a plume of flame spiraling toward them. Mara banked sharply, guiding the helicopter through the narrow gap. Sparks sizzled across the cockpit, flames licking dangerously close. Calloway gritted his teeth, eyes wide. "Lieutenant, one more mistake." "Not happening," Mara snapped. Her hands danced over the controls, micro-adjustments keeping them balanced by mere inches. The helicopter tilted violently, then stabilized. The unknown heat signatures darted under smoke columns, circling, converging, waiting. The ridge appeared ahead, their extraction point. Flames still surged below, but a narrow corridor of relative safety opened just beyond. Mara accelerated, banking through the canyon gap, skimming the cliff walls. Sparks flew, the rotors screamed, and the fuselage groaned under stress. Calloway exhaled sharply. We're making it." Mara didn't allow herself relief. She focused on the last stretch, the final gauntlet. Flames roared around them, smoke thick, visibility near zero. The unknown signatures closed in one last time. Instruments flickered under heat stress. "Brace for turbulence," Mara shouted. The helicopter lurched violently, buffeted by fire columns and updrafts. Medics and crew held on tight, hearts pounding. Calloway's brother squeezed his eyes shut. Calloway leaned over him protectively. A massive flame plume shot from the canyon floor, directly beneath their path. Mara twisted the collective, banking sharply to clear it, barely missing a jagged outcrop of rock. Sparks flew across the windshield. Flames surged past the tail rotor. The helicopter groaned under the extreme stress. The unknown heat signatures surged beneath the smoke again, closing in, faster than before. Mara's eyes flicked to the thermal display, precise, intelligent movements, closing the distance, but she wasn't about to falter. "Final maneuver," Mara shouted. "Hold tight, we clear this now or we die trying." The helicopter surged forward, engines screaming, rotors slicing through the smoke and flame. Mara twisted and tilted, banking through the ridge gap with inches to spare on either side. Sparks flew off the fuselage, flames brushed the rotors. Below, the unknown heat signatures attempted one last strike, but Mara's precise maneuvering kept the helicopter beyond their reach. One more tilt, one more adjustment, and the corridor opened fully, the extraction path ahead clear for the first time in minutes that felt like hours. Calloway's jaw dropped. I can't believe it, you did it." Mara's eyes remained locked forward. "Not yet, stay alert, we're not safe until we're clear." The helicopter cleared the canyon entirely, rising above the flames, smoke trailing behind like ghostly fingers. The thermal signatures slowed below, stalled by the altitude and Mara's precise navigation. The crew exhaled collectively, their hands gripping harnesses a moment longer, hearts pounding. Calloway finally let himself relax, looking at his brother. You're okay. We made it." Lucas, his younger brother, shook, pale but alive, tears streaking soot from his face. "I thought I was done for," he whispered. Calloway's grip tightened on him. "Not today, not here," he glanced at Mara. "Lieutenant Holt, I don't know how you did it, but you kept us alive, every one of us." Mara allowed herself a small exhale, jaw unclenching slightly. "Everyone survives," she said, voice calm, controlled. "For now, stay focused until we land." The extraction point came into view, a flat, scorched plateau beyond the canyon, safety at last. The helicopter descended carefully, rotors slicing through still rising smoke. The team prepared to disembark, medics stabilizing the injured, Calloway's brother finally able to breathe without panic. The unknown heat signatures remained below, mysterious and unconquered, but they were no longer an immediate threat. The canyon, alive with fire and fury, had tested them beyond any limit, and they had survived. The helicopter touched down safely on the plateau. Engines whined, rotors slowing. Calloway exhaled fully, muscles relaxing for the first time. His brother stared at the canyon below, shaking but alive. Medics checked the civilians and team, confirming survival. Mara finally allowed herself to glance at the team. Faces were streaked with soot, sweat, and exhaustion, but every pair of eyes reflected awe, relief, and respect. They had survived the impossible, threaded the needle through the canyon's fury, and come out alive. Calloway approached Mara, voice low, raw with emotion. "Lieutenant, you are insane and incredible. I don't know how you pulled that off." Mara finally smiled faintly, a rare expression breaking through her focused exterior. "We survived because we trusted each other," she said softly, "because we didn't hesitate, and because we refused to fail." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the canyon in a final fiery glow. Smoke rose in twisting columns, the unknown signatures retreating into shadows. The team looked at the inferno they had just escaped, hearts still racing, minds still absorbing the chaos they had survived. Calloway stood beside Mara, watching the canyon in awe and disbelief. "I thought I'd seen it all, but this is something else." Mara's gaze returned forward, toward the plateau, toward safety, toward life. "It's not over until everyone's safe," she said. And with that, the helicopter slowly taxied to the final landing point, engines humming, crew alive, hearts still pounding, spirits unbroken. The canyon behind them roared one last time, flames twisting like a living beast, before settling into silence. They had survived the inferno, faced the impossible, and come out together. And somewhere in the shifting smoke, the unknown signatures lingered, reminding them that the world was full of dangers, but also that courage, skill, and determination could carry them through even the deadliest storms. Mara Holt exhaled slowly, eyes sharp, hands still steady on the controls. She had faced the impossible, and for the first time she allowed herself a moment of relief. But she knew true survival demanded vigilance. Always. The team stepped onto solid ground, weary, battered, but alive. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the canyon. And in that quiet, tense moment they understood they had survived the inferno together. But the memory of the canyon's fury would stay with them forever. End of story.